we're going to do transformations next, and we will actually be displacing the points that these objects are copied onto, and that's going to allow us to have a little more control without changing any of the underlying geometry. So the first thing we're going to do is we know that we're going to have position coming in, and we will have position coming out, and we will simply be adding onto that position. So we're just going to go ahead and put an add down there, and we'll connect that right there, and then connect the sum to position. So we're going to take effect here, and we're going to fit that again. So we'll just fit effect right here, and then we're going to promote the destination min and the destination max. And we will call this transform min. And again, min transform. And we will call this transform max. And then max transform. So we have an amount here, but we need to choose a direction. So what we'll do is set this up first with object space direction, and we'll simply just make a parameter here. And this parameter will be a 3-float vector. And we will call this object space transform. And the label for this, we'll just call this X form, and then in parentheses, object space. Okay, and we'll set this up as a default value of 1 in the Z axis. And we're just going to go ahead and multiply this value by our shift, and we'll wire the product of that right into add. Now we'll go ahead and take a look here at our min and max transform. So let's make sure that that's working. Then if we wanted to go minimum the other way so that it's all spread out evenly, that seems to work. Okay, that's working as expected. And let's go ahead and make the object space back down to 0. Now, let's try a couple other different spaces and throw them in here. I'm just making a little bit more room. So what we'll do is we will make a switch so that we can choose between a few different spaces here. What a switch does is it takes a value, and we have multiple inputs coming in, and based on this value, it's going to feed out a different result. So if we get a 0 for whatever's coming in here, it's going to feed out input number 1. If we get a 1, it's going to feed out input number 2, and so on. So let's just promote that there, and we will call this transform space. And I'm going to just label this as well. And then we are going to choose to provide a menu for the user. So we'll choose menu from items. And the first one, all we have to do is say that menu item number 0, and then in quotes, is going to be equal to object. Then another quote, and then menu item number 1 here is going to be equal to normal. And then finally, we'll say there's a third option there, and we'll just call that random. Now we need to plug these in, so we know that 0 is object space. I'm just going to wire object space right into here, and then we'll take the result and go into the multiply. Now our normals, we want to make sure that we normalize that. As well, you know, anything coming in here should be normalized. So why don't we make sure that instead of normalizing there, we'll just disconnect that and we'll normalize after the switch. So anything that's coming in, any space is going to be normalized. Now we'll go ahead and grab the normals, and that will go into number 2. And then for number 3, we said it was going to be random. So let's go ahead and put down random. We will drive that by the point number and make sure that we output a 3D vector. And then finally, make sure that this value is random in all directions. So we will go ahead and do a fit range here, wire that into value, and then -1, -1, and -1 for our min. Take the shift, and that goes into input number 3. Okay, let's check it out and see if it works here. So max transform, I'm going to dial up to 1. I'm going to go to normal, and now we can see that our max transform, if our value is 1, we're going to push points outward. If it's 0, they're not going to go anywhere. And if it's negative, they're going to start to converge. And then we will choose random and see how that's working for us. Cool. So we see that we do get some stuff flipping in there. Don't worry, because we will deal with rotations later. So let's go ahead and save our progress, and then we'll do some cleanup and see if there's anything else we want to do with transformations before moving on. We'll do a couple little pieces of housekeeping here. I've decided I don't like the way that this looks here as XForm object space, so I'm going to go in and find that here. So that's object space transform, and I'm simply going to call this direction. Leave that as is. Now we are going to grab all of this stuff here that's coming in, and we're just going to select all of that stuff, and we'll put that into a network box as well. And let's just call this XForm, transform, and I'm going to collapse that. All right, so that's a little bit cleaner. And then let's go up here. And we can sort of start to organize this a little bit. I'm going to go into the parameter interface. And let's go ahead and take a quick look while we're in here. Let's clean up some stuff here. So this whole Vex setup thing here, we don't actually ever need to see that. So I'm going to mark that whole tab as invisible. Attribute bindings, I'll go ahead and mark that as invisible. And now let's see if there was anything else we want to look at. We can keep group and group type. That's fine. We can keep all of these. I don't know if they'll all work if we're not on points mode, but we can keep that here for now. I'm just going to click apply so we can see what happens. So a lot of our excess stuff goes away. And now what I'm going to do is just move direction underneath transform space. And this is a bit confusing to see this if we're not actually on object mode. So what I'm going to do is hide that. So what we'll say is hide when. We can actually choose this transform space here. So I'm just copying this transform space, and we can say that if that is not equal to 0, then we hide it. And the way we do that is to hide like this. We do a curly bracket, and then the name of the parameter here. And I'm going to say not equal, so that's the exclamation point and then equal sign. So if that is not equal to 0, and then closed bracket, and then we'll hit apply and accept, and let's see how that works. So now we see transform space. If I turn it to object, all of a sudden that becomes visible here. Go back to normal, and then we don't see it anymore. So we've done a little bit of cleanup here with the interface. And in terms of how we organize the rest of this stuff, we could do a couple things. We could either organize that in tabs, or we can do a couple other little organizational things like collapsible folders and stuff. For now, what we'll do is we'll make a folder here, and we'll grab all of the scaling things that we did. Let's just grab all that. Let's put this in a folder labeled scale. And then we'll make another folder, just dragging it right to the root. Let's grab all the transformations, and we'll put that in a folder called transform. And for now, we'll just make this some collapsible tab. We may change this later, but for now, we'll just kind of keep it a little bit clean. I'm going to hit accept. So now we have this nice little interface here that I can just toggle down. If I just want to see transform, I can work with that. Or if I just want to see scale, then I can just work with scale. So we'll go ahead and save and then move on to the next chapter here.